Hello everyone. So as our next speaker, I would like to present you Walter from BitPay. Please welcome Walter.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Walter Drieënhuizen and I'm from BitPay. To clear out one thing, I think you probably will be expecting somebody else on this stage, as the picture is still an old picture of my colleague. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, so I'll be filling in for him. So today I'll be talking about Bitcoin, about BitPay, and how that Bitcoin is doing in Europe specifically. So just to show you a little bit about the agenda for me for the next half an hour. First half an hour I'll be presenting, let's say, a story about Bitcoin, about BitPay, and then after that we will have about 10 minutes of Q&A. So please keep your questions for later. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin and why is it interesting for you as a merchant? I'm sure that there are some merchants about in the audience. I'm going to talk a little bit how it works. I won't go too much into detail because then it will be a story for about a couple of hours long, and I don't want to do that to you. Also a little bit about the history, who is accepting Bitcoin, some of the names that are now in place. Yesterday, of course, we had a great presentation from my colleagues from Bitcoin Kaupat and Bittiraha about a couple of interesting players here in Finland who are accepting Bitcoin right now, including Auto Outlet. I also talk a little bit about some of the statistics. So just to show you a little bit where Bitcoin is at the moment and where it's going to go. And of course, it will be interesting for you to look at that as well. At the end, I'll talk a little bit about BitPay as well, what we do, and how the Bitcoin industry is evolving here in Europe. So, what is Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin you can see as three different things. First of all, you can see it as a currency, and I think a lot of you here will probably know Bitcoin more as a trading commodity than anything else. Just to ask around, who has ever heard of Bitcoin before today? All right, a lot of hands there in the back. Of course, these are my colleagues. But before today, those who have heard of Bitcoin, have you ever spent any Bitcoin? Do you hold any Bitcoins? Anyone here? Again, the guys in the back, of course. Well, it's not strange. Bitcoin, of course, is a very new currency. And it's a very new payment method and also a protocol. And I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. It's only been around since about 5 years. So it's not strange that a lot of people don't know about Bitcoin yet. And of course, what we're trying to do is trying to educate and to show why Bitcoin is an interesting concept to use, also for merchants in various verticals. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So, Bitcoin is a currency, it's a trading commodity, but it's also a payment method. So actually to transfer those Bitcoins, you of course need a payment method for that as well. That is also Bitcoin. So we have it as a currency, we have it as a payment method, but it's also a protocol. So for those who know how, for example, sending an email works, or for example, how the protocol of the internet looks like, Bitcoin has its own protocol as well to transfer value. But there are many other things that can be done with the Bitcoin protocol, and again, this is something that I'll touch upon a little bit later on. But that's pretty much the basics, what you have to think of if you talk about Bitcoin. Now, about a transaction, how does that look like? And how does that actually work? So, Bitcoin being a peer-to-peer payment method, and a consumer-to-business payment method. What you need in order for a Bitcoin transaction to take place is, of course, a receiving wallet. Well, this wallet can be in many forms. It can be a mobile wallet, it can be a desktop wallet, and it can even be a hardware wallet. For example, a wallet that you have on a USB stick, for example. Within this wallet you store, or at least you store your private key that constitutes, or that says, I have right to spend the Bitcoin that I've acquired. So acquiring Bitcoins can be done in many ways. For those of you who have not heard of it, you can, for example, buy them on exchange. In Holland, for example, you can buy them through websites where you can use the payment method Ideal, for example. You can also use local Bitcoins. And of course, you can just buy the Bitcoin from somebody who will exchange it for cash. So various methods there. But once acquired those Bitcoin and you want to spend them, you will of course need a receiving wallet as well. And the transaction that takes place, that actually takes place between the two, the receiving and the sending wallet, or it can also be a gateway, of course. And that's something that BitPay comes in, and I'll tell a little bit about that later on. For these transactions to take place, you evidently need the Bitcoin protocol and the Bitcoin network. The great thing about Bitcoin here, and this is the biggest difference between conventional payment methods like MasterCard or even the use of PayPal, is there's no middleman. There's no institution in between that says whether this transaction can take place or not, or there's no centralized institution that actually can take a cut out of that transaction. If you look at the credit card transaction, there are, of course, many players in between. There are acquirers, there are issuers, there are other players that are in that rail, let's say, in a payment rail, that will take some cut of the transaction. So Bitcoin is you can say, a decentralized, consensus-based protocol. And that creates a lot of interesting possibilities. So if we look at the network and how many players are active in this network, I've designed this following picture. First of all, there are miners. Again, I won't go into too much detail on that because it's quite a complicated matter. But miners are here to generate Bitcoin in the industry. But miners also make sure that the transactions that are taking place between all these wallets and all these gateways are being validated. And of course, you need this transaction to be validated in order for it to go through. So miners are very important. They generate the Bitcoin, and at the moment we have about 14 million Bitcoins in circulation. And just to give you an idea, that the last Bitcoin which will be mined will be in the year 2145. So that's about 130 years from now. Of course you would be thinking, well, Bitcoin has only been 5 years old, or at least it's been introduced in 2008, and really been mined, let's say, and started to work in 2011. How come so many Bitcoins are actually being mined in the beginning phase, and there are still 130 years left for the other 7 million, because 21 million is the max? That's because it's becoming more and more difficult to actually mine those Bitcoins. So you can pretty much compare it with gold. Mining gold, for example, is also a process that takes longer and longer, takes more energy to get the gold out of the ground. And you can compare it with that. So you have the miners that actually generating Bitcoin for us to acquire. You also have the exchanges. So in order to exchange Bitcoin for a fiat currency, of course you need to have these players around. And you can see China, Bitfinex, Bitstamp, these are one of the bigger players that are actually making it possible for us to acquire Bitcoin and to exchange them from the fiat currency that we have in our pocket into Bitcoin and vice versa. So BitPay also uses exchanges, for example, to exchange the Bitcoin that we acquire from customers and exchange it into fiat currency that we send to our merchants. Again, I'll speak a little bit about BitPay later on. You also have the wallets, and I talked about those wallets. So, for example, if you have a wallet on an iPhone, a company like Circle has designed this for you to actually hold those Bitcoins in this wallet, and for you as a consumer to spend them. There are many companies around that deliver wallets, and there are also a lot of different functionalities within these wallets and developments taking place for consumers to really easily acquire Bitcoin and also to spend them online. Later on I'll talk a little bit about the investments that take place in this area, and you will see what will happen and what will probably happen in a couple of this year and next year in terms of those developments. Now the fourth part are, of course, the merchants. And we from BitPay, we help those merchants to accept Bitcoin. And they are, of course, a vital part for this community to grow, and also for consumers to be confronted, or at least to see the Bitcoin becoming bigger in the industry. So these are pretty much the players around in the Bitcoin industry that are necessary for this product to develop. And of course, payment processors like BitPay are there as well, together with the merchants, to make it possible for these Bitcoins to be traded. So just to have a small look at the history of Bitcoin. Now, there are many, many other events that have taken place between 2008 and today, but these are some of the key ones. So first of all, 2008, Bitcoin was invented. It was designed by a group or a person called Satoshi Nakamoto. And this white paper actually solved a couple of issues that were not able to be solved before 2008. And this is mainly because of double spending. If I compare it a little bit with, for example, a CD you can copy and easily distribute. Well, this of course could then also be the case with Bitcoin if this double spending, we call it, was not solved. So this white paper had made a solution to actually stop this double spending from taking place. So the first transaction actually took place in 2009. So quite interesting. It took a while, of course, for this white paper to develop, and a lot of developers helped within the industry to actually construct and develop this community. And the first transaction took place in 2009. So that's only 6 years ago. And after that, a few more developments took place to really make the Bitcoin industry a industry and a currency to stay. One of that is that the first exchange took place in 2010, or was established. So that was possible for people to buy these Bitcoins online. The first brick and mortar shop was established in 2011. This was room 77, I believe, in Berlin. So he was definitely one of the first movers, and a great guy, by the way, to talk to. And in 2012, this was pretty much a milestone for Bitcoin. WordPress started to accept it. So all the web shops within WordPress were able to accept Bitcoin through a very simple configuration. So this really created a lot of exposure, and a lot of web shops are looked at this development and actually followed as well after that. And soon we reached about 15,000 merchants in the beginning of 2013. This is not only BitPay, although BitPay is pretty much the first payment processor within the industry, but also some other processors started to develop these gateways and to acquire merchants. 2014 was for us a very interesting milestone, as December Microsoft started to accept Bitcoin. They accept this in their store, and in their store you will be able to buy, for example, Xbox games or videos or anything like that. You'll be able to top up your account with Bitcoin. So a very interesting development, and Microsoft is not only looking into using Bitcoin for that purpose, but they really want to look at what can be done in the future with this technology as well. So a great partner to have, not only as a customer. And in 2015, which we are now, we have just reached about 100,000 merchants within the community. So that's some interesting figures to see where Bitcoin has come from and where it is going. And if we look at the next slope, this graph, you see that there is a gradual increase in transactions as well. So these are daily transactions. It's about around 100,000 a day. You see a little bit that there is a decline in the beginning. This has to do a little bit with the price fall that Bitcoin has experienced lately. But this price fall, although it has increased or it has continued, you see that the transactions are still increasing. So the sentiment in terms of new customers spending Bitcoin is still there, despite from the price decline. So, of course, the Bitcoin industry is very, very excited about Bitcoin, evidently. But what about all the other companies around the Bitcoin community that are looking at this technology and thinking, well, can we do something with it, and is it interesting for us to invest? Well, last year, about $500 million have been invested into startups within the Bitcoin industry, including BitPay as well. We got a fund in the beginning of May. And they're spread all over the industry. So I talked about miners, and I talked about wallets, and I talked about the merchants and all that. If you look at this graph, you can see a little bit the difference between 2013 and 2014 in terms of the investments that have taken place. So payments processing, for example, have got a lot of investment from outside VCs, and for example, Richard Branson invested into BitPay. There are all kinds of entrepreneurs and angel investors that are really, really keen on this Bitcoin development. So if we continue, of course, for those who have a web shop in the audience, would like to know, well, why is Bitcoin interesting for me? Why should I accept it? Well, it depends a little bit on what type of web shop you have, and it depends a little bit what target market you have. But there are some general benefits for merchants to have. First of all, you know, it's a global payment method. So, for example, if I make a payment to somebody else or to a web shop somewhere else, it doesn't matter where I am, and it doesn't matter what the amount is. It will just be as quick and just be as cheap. So for those who, for example, are interested in selling internationally, it is very easy to actually accept payments from people abroad. So sell globally. The other one is lower costs. I made a comparison with email. Sending an email these days, I mean, you can't really put a value to it. It is pretty much costless. The same counts for Bitcoin. It uses this protocol which is very efficient and very cheap, and you don't have the middleman like many of the other payment methods have. What this means is that accepting Bitcoin for a merchant, you know, you don't face, for example, the 2.5% or 3% transaction fee that credit cards have. You know, your cost will be either to 0.5% or even to 0. So a very interesting way and very interesting method to actually to start accepting Bitcoin without many barriers of cost. The other one is lower risk. Bitcoin, unlike credit cards, you can't charge back. So once spent by the consumer, they can't take it back. And if you look at fraud and chargeback risks that a lot of merchants are facing, sometimes this is a 5 to 10% loss in cost or in revenue. This will not be the case in terms of Bitcoin. Now, another interesting benefit is, of course, the marketing aspect. Bitcoin is, of course, a very innovative payment method and innovative technology. And as a merchant, you can take advantage of this by showing as well to your customers, well, I'm there as well. I would like to show as well that I'm tech savvy or I'm innovative. Therefore, I accept Bitcoin. So a lot of merchants that we've connected have actually benefited from this and actually generated new revenue. And that's the fifth benefit. There are a lot of consumers around that hold Bitcoin, and they are mostly male between 18 and 35 at the moment, and this is spreading out though towards other groups. But this target market, if you do have a product that is appealing for this target market, you will be able to reach those people, and you'll be able to generate new revenue. For example, yesterday I had a very nice dinner at one of the restaurants here in Helsinki, and they accepted Bitcoin. The reason why I went there is because they accepted Bitcoin, and I didn't go to another restaurant because, well, they didn't have Bitcoin as a payment method. So you're able to generate new income as well with this. So, what about consumers? What are the benefits for consumers? Because merchants, they seem to have quite some benefits. What about consumers? So, if, for example, you as a merchant would offer and accept Bitcoin, you will reduce your cost with either 2.5% or 3% in terms of not having those credit card costs, for example. So therefore, you will also be able to actually offer your prices at a discount. And this could be a benefit for consumers to actually purchase at your store, because you're able to offer your products for a lower price if you pay with Bitcoin. The other thing is that it's far more reduced fraud risks and identity theft. Although you don't have fully, let's say you still have a risk of your identity being exposed, or how you say it, be found out. It is very much a payment method where you don't have to show your identity, or where hackers can find your identity very easily, such as with credit cards or other payment methods. They are stored in a database. With Bitcoin, or if you have a wallet, there's no database where your identity is stored. So that's a benefit as well for consumers. And that's also accounting for the next point, improving privacy. And of course, if we look at the unbanked, of course in Africa there are a lot of unbanked people. But also, for example, in a country like Romania, there's about 50% who don't have a bank account. There are other solutions for that as well, like for example PaySafeCard. But Bitcoin is a great solution there as well, if you don't need a bank account to actually spend your Bitcoin. So for those who don't have the ability, or for those who are too young, for example, to get a bank account, this is also a great solution. And definitely in third world countries, or for example in Africa, this is something that is, of course, very appealing to be using. So who's accepting Bitcoin? I showed an example of auto outlets selling Teslas and Lamborghinis for Bitcoin. That's a great example, of course, but there are some other ones here as well. So we have a couple of verticals that we focus on as BitPay, and these are, first of all, payment service providers. Of course, they are a great sales channel for us to reach more clients. For example, PayPal, we've hooked up Adyen. We had about 3 weeks ago the release that we have partnered with Adyen. For those who don't know, Adyen is pretty much in Europe at least, and also worldwide, a large PSP with a lot of clients. Global Payments, SumUp, Solar, some of these more payment processors that we like to work with in order to reach as many clients as possible. But also there are some other interesting verticals, such as travel, Expedia, Cheap Air, L Baltic. These are all services that are appealing for those who hold Bitcoin at the moment, those 18 to 35 mil people. Gaming is another one. Of course, gaming is an interesting vertical for that target market. And Microsoft is one of those. Steam, Jagex is actually one of the clients of Adyen who went live a couple of weeks ago. Interesting vertical. So if you have, for example, a shop or a service that are within these verticals, that is of course very interesting. Another one is retail. And retail, for example, consumer electronic goods or IT related goods are again a very interesting vertical to introduce Bitcoin into. So these are some examples. Of course there are many more, but these are one of the most of the prominent ones. So what does BitPay do? Talk to a little bit what clients we have, what place we have in the Bitcoin community. What we are the largest payment processor for Bitcoin, and we're also the first one out there. So in 2011 we were established. What we do is we actually enable merchants to accept Bitcoin without actually having the volatility risk. It tells you a little bit about the volatility of Bitcoin. The price has gone up and down quite frequently. So for a lot of merchants out there who will be saying, well, I don't want to be exposed with that volatility, Bitcoin offers a solution for this. So what we do is we accept Bitcoin on behalf of merchants, and we convert it into fiat currency. And the next day we settle it, for example, in euros. That way you don't have any volatility risk as a merchant. And accepting Bitcoin, therefore, is something that doesn't show many barriers. So there is, for BitPay customers, no transaction fee. This is quite strange and, well, would be also revolutionary in terms of the payment industry. I mentioned credit cards having quite a high percentage. PayPal, of course, has, and many of the other payment methods have a transaction-based fee. We believe in software as a service. So we actually say there are no transaction fees. So it doesn't matter how much volume you have through your shop or how big the amounts are. That doesn't affect the price, but we charge a flat fee per month. And that ranges from 20 euros to higher, depending if you're an enterprise or if you're a small merchant. So that's pretty much what we do, and we service merchants worldwide. So we have offices in Amsterdam. For Europe, we have offices in Atlanta and San Francisco and Buenos Aires, and we're expanding definitely in the coming time as well. So just a few numbers. Founded in 2011 by Tony Galippi and Stephen Pear. We have about 50,000 merchants at the moment. We have about 55% or 54% market share, so definitely the leader there. And per month we transfer, or at least we process about 20 to 40 million US dollars. We have about 80 employees worldwide, and like I said, last year we are venture backed by a place like Index Ventures and Richard Branson for about $32 million. So if we look at merchant adoption in terms of our client base, it's a nice rocket there, sky is the limit, we would think. There's definitely a great increase, and it's exponential. The greater the community gets, the more merchants are actually looking at Bitcoin and thinking, well, this is definitely something interesting for us to do. And of course, we're spreading, not only BitPay, but also our competitors or our colleagues are really growing the Bitcoin industry. And this is why this slope makes exponential growth to really skyrocket. So if we now look at the spread of Bitcoin acceptance, we see that the United States has the greatest market share. That's because a lot of the players, including BitPay, have been established in 2011, pretty much in the beginning phase, in the States. So some of our competitors and colleagues and some of the wallets that have been developed, such as Coinbase and Circle, they are American-based. So that's where the greatest, let's say, market share is. But what we see is that it's moving towards Europe as well. A lot of other players are starting to come up and starting to develop interesting tools within Europe. So we believe that this difference will definitely level out, and actually I think Europe will be far more ahead because there are a lot of different countries that are interested in Bitcoin. Not only merchants, not only the business area, but also governments and banks. They are experimenting and they are flirting with Bitcoin. So that's pretty much the spread. And of course, in Africa, it's much lower. In Southern America, we have a presence there, so it's growing there, but it's still relatively small. And Australia is also a very, very interesting place for Bitcoin to grow quicker. It's a great environment for Bitcoin companies to establish there. So if we look at the European Union and how many clients we as BitPay are boarding, we can say that in the last 3 months we board about 3,000 merchants, and this is getting bigger every month. So every month there are more and more merchants accepting, and we believe that this will increase really quickly in the coming months, also because there's a lot of investment taking place, like I said, last year. And all these investments are now actually converting into new companies or new functionalities that make it easier for people to acquire Bitcoin, to hold Bitcoin, to spend Bitcoin. And of course, we as a company will benefit from that whole community and the whole investment environment. So in Europe, there are about 15,000 merchants accepting Bitcoin at the moment. And of course, 15,000 sounds like a great number, and it is. There are a lot of small merchants as well. We have 55,000 merchants, and not all enterprise merchants. Although our services are focused on enterprise, we of course have a responsibility to grow the market as well. So we offer our services to everyone, to smaller merchants and bigger merchants. And within that 15,000, of course, a large portion of these merchants are relatively small, and they're experimenting with Bitcoin. But like we saw on the slide with all these customers, it's becoming more and more serious. So larger companies are becoming very familiar with Bitcoin, and they're starting to invest in it and starting to accept it. So what are the top EU countries? Well, I'm from Netherlands, 3rd place, not bad. But where we really see the development taking place and the most merchants coming in is Germany and the UK. And the UK has a great environment in terms of acceptance. Of course, there's a huge tech environment in London. There's a lot of things happening there. And we as BitPay, we focus on this country as well, of course. If we look at Finland, BitPay itself, we have a focus on a couple of key countries. Like I just said, Germany, the UK and the Netherlands. Also the US, evidently, because we have our strong presence there. And we focus on the South America. Now all the other countries, of course, we would love to service as well. And what we do is we establish partnerships with local players such as Bitcoin Kaupat and Bittiraha, and they are really strengthening our strategy to have a local presence, to serve merchants in a way that is custom to, so the culture of the country will take place. And and this is also a way how we can grow. So in terms of our Finnish partners, Bitcoin Kaupat and Bittiraha, this will be the end of my presentation, by the way, and I would like to invite Henry Braid. He is the CEO and founder of Bittiraha, to help me out as well in terms of some questions that you have, and also to put a face to the company that will be helping you if you have questions and if you would like to integrate with BitPay. So if anyone has some questions, please shoot.
All right, hello, Henry from Bittiraha. We've been doing integrations with BitPay in Finland for 3 years now, so I have also quite a bit of experience with BitPay. So any questions, please answer. And also if it's suomeksi saa myös kysyä. Mä voin tulkata sen sitten, jos se menee Walterille, niin sekin käy suomeksi tai englanniksi, kumpi tahansa.
No problem. Yes, please. Oh, maybe, we'll give you the microphone, yeah.
I have a webshop. I want to propose bitcoins to my customers. How do I price my products?
Well, pricing your products will be the same like you used to. I guess you will be pricing in euros. Not sure what shop you have, but for example, if you be selling shoes, for example, and you will have your product be priced in euros. So if, for example, it's a shoe of 100 euros, the customer will put it in its web basket and will proceed to the checkout process. And within the checkout process, you will have a choice whether to use credit cards or any other payment method and Bitcoin. And what happens then is that the customer will be either redirected to, let's say, our platform. And when that happens, we convert that 100 euros into the value of Bitcoin. So at that moment, we look at the exchange rate, and we look at the best exchange rate there is. We have a system in place that looks at all the ledgers, let's say, of these exchange rates. And once the customer reaches the checkout page, and in this case he will go to the BitPay checkout page, and he will have to scan a QR code, he will be presented with the equivalent of 100 euros in Bitcoin. So that will be something like 0.35 Bitcoin or something like that. He will transfer that Bitcoin to the platform. We will capture that and we will convert it for you the next day and settle it the next day. And you will actually receive 100 euros back. So there is no cost in between that process, and you don't have to show your prices in Bitcoin, because then of course you have to change every day the pricing, because the volatility of course and the pricing level fluctuates. So in terms of your business process and the way how you price your products, nothing changes. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Yes, please.
What was your estimation when you are accepting, when PayPal will accept Bitcoins, and how the hell did you change their attitude for the Bitcoin?
Okay, well this is a good story. There are different types of PayPal integrations. You have, of course, the main PayPal integration where you actually connect your credit card and all your bank account, and with that, as a consumer, you can spend. But PayPal also has a different service. It's called the PayPal Payments Hub. And this is pretty much the same like payment service providers work. So they show a checkout page with different kinds of payment methods, credit cards and all that. And one of them will be BitPay or Bitcoin. The PayPal Payments Hub is mostly supported only in the digital world, or so for digital products, I mean. And it's more or less an experimental stage. There are some shops using it. So for the broad, let's say, acceptance of PayPal and Bitcoin within their standard service, this is not yet the case.
So I can't spend Bitcoins in Amazon or eBay? eBay yet?
No, not yet. No, no, no.
Why is it why is the value so volatile for Bitcoin? Why so?
Okay.
It was 1,000 or something last
Yeah,
year.
a very good question, and maybe I can invite Henry to answer that question.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Honestly, like at Bittiraha, we do Bitcoin exchange, and I'm really familiar with all the volatility. And I personally like to study the currency aspects of Bitcoin because it is a digital currency that has its own exchange rate. I like to think of it this way: like the value is the supply and demand that kind of where the value comes from, and it's a total free market. So you can have buyers and sellers in different exchanges. They can do whatever they want and so on. And if you think about how the euro or the dollar is and how much money is involved in those markets, you have trillions or billions or whatever euros and dollars, worth of euros and dollars in existence. If you look at Bitcoin, all of the Bitcoins in existence, which is around 13 million Bitcoins at the moment, which are around 200 euros a piece, their total value is in the range of a couple of billion euros. So that's kind of the amount, the value in the euro market or dollar market is 1,000 times more, or 10,000 times more, or 100,000 times more liquidity, more money, which means that it's much more difficult for that kind of huge economy to move in such a volatile way. But then you have like a small pond, like a Bitcoin, where you can have a single investor, maybe a big investor or fund that puts money into Bitcoin, and suddenly the whole pond kind of floods. So it's the euro market or the dollar market is an ocean, and Bitcoin is basically just a small lake. That's how I see it. You can quite much more easily affect the exchange rate of Bitcoin than you can of the dollar or the euro. That's the reason. But Bitcoin is getting bigger all the time. Every year there's more liquidity, there's more money in the market, there's more trading, there's more volume. Every year we're seeing it grow. So that will make the exchange rate less volatile through time. So maybe in 10 years Bitcoin will be a little bit more stable in the exchange rate, but it will take a long time because it's still so little compared to euro or the dollar. But I think that with this growth rate, it will definitely get better year by year.
And just to follow up on that, of course, the volatility is a risk for consumers at the moment, because if you hold your Bitcoin and the price goes down, you will lose your money. On the merchant side, like what I explained about BitPay, we take away the volatility risk for the merchant. But what about the consumer? Because it takes a while, like Henry said, that the volatility or the stability of Bitcoin will be flat. A lot of companies are now looking into solving this issue, especially the wallet companies like Circle. They are now developing a way how a consumer doesn't actually hold Bitcoin, but can spend Bitcoin. So their wallet doesn't consist of holding Bitcoin, but for example just euros. But when you actually want to spend your Bitcoin, or you want to spend your euros on a web shop that accepts Bitcoin, it will convert it right away instantly to Bitcoin and use the rails of Bitcoin and all the advantages, such as the low cost and the quick transfer of funds. So the consumer is not liable for the volatility risk as well. So both sides then is actually solved, although of course the Bitcoin currency itself will definitely reach a stable value as well in the future.
Yeah, let's quickly continue that it's important to separate that Bitcoin it's a digital currency, but it's also a payment network. So there's those are a little bit two different things. So as Walter said, you can actually use Bitcoin without touching the currency ever. Obviously, as a merchant, that's really easy using BitPay. You just take Bitcoin, but you get your money as euros into the bank account. So you're not actually touching Bitcoins. But it's also becoming possible to do that for the consumer as well. You can have euros, but it gets converted to Bitcoins when you spend them online somewhere. So, but that's kind of a choice because the volatility is it's not all bad. Like if you look at how the value of Bitcoins have gone since the last 5 years, it has skyrocketed. Not since the last year, but if you look at longer time, the value of Bitcoins is going up, which means that it's not necessarily a bad idea to have some Bitcoins, but it's a choice. You could also use the Bitcoin payment network, not look at the volatility and just skip the volatility and keep your money in euros and simply still use the Bitcoin payment network. So both can be possible.
All right. No further questions? No. Okay. Well, I would like to thank you for your time.